What's up guys, this is Voxide and welcome to another After Effects tutorial. In this tutorial we're gonna be creating this nice lava texture, and after we create this texture we will go one extra step and just create a nice transition to a logo, as you can see here. So let's go ahead and let's get started, and I will create a new composition, a new project first, and let's create a new comp, and I'm using 300 frames, which is 10 seconds, frame rate of 30 and full HD, and hit OK. And let's go ahead and create a new solid, so Ctrl Y, and I will name this lava base. Alright, and go to effect. Let's go to noise and grain and choose fractal noise. Let's go ahead, and for our transform I will turn off uniform scaling, and I will increase the scale height, and I will set this noise type to be, or actually I will set the fractal type to be, let's see, dynamic twist. And you can already see we're getting a nice result. And let's go ahead and set up our animation first, and I'm gonna go ahead and actually just create a new adjustment layer first, and I will rename this adjustment layer to controls. Alright, and I'm gonna go to effect, expression controls, and choose slider control. I will duplicate this slider control, so Ctrl D, and I will rename the first slider control to movement, and my second slider control I will rename this to evolution. Alright, so here's what I'm gonna do. I want to link this second value of the offset turbulence. So you can see as I scroll the second value, we are creating that downwards movement. And also I want to be able to control through my adjustment layer the evolution value, which creates this nice animation. Alright, so here's what I'm gonna do. Let's prepare our effects. So I'm just gonna drop down our slider values so I can later use these values, and let's go to our lava base layer, and if I alt and left click the offset turbulence, you can now add an expression. I will open and close brackets, alright, and in between the brackets I will type 0 and then comma, then I will type time multiplied, and then I will use the pick whip and choose the slider property for our movement. Alright, so this guy over here. And now I can release. And here's what this does. If I now increase the movement value for this slider, so I can go ahead and to my controls inside the movement, let's give this a movement of maybe 50. And if I scroll my timeline now, you can see that this has a downwards movement. And if I increase the slider value to maybe 250, now the movement will be faster. And I will also add an expression to our evolution, and let's actually just go to our evolution, and I will alt and left click the stopwatch for the evolution, and again I will use the time property, so time, and I'm gonna multiply this by, and then pick whip our second value for our slider controls, which is the evolution one, and then release. And as I increase the evolution here, so let's give this a value of 25, you can now see that we also are animating our evolution, and maybe let's increase this to 75, and let's just make a quick RAM preview and see what we got. Alright, so pretty good. Let's actually just set the movement to maybe 150, and I will increase the slider to maybe the evolution value to maybe 100. Alright, so slightly better, and you can always just go back and readjust these controls as much as you want. Let's go inside this lava base layer and let's do some adjustments over here. Let's go to our subsetting, and I will increase the subscaling a bit. And maybe our sub influence as well. So this just adds in a little bit more detail. Alright, so starting a little bit more to look like lava, let's just increase our height and maybe even the width. And maybe increase the subscaling again. Or actually, I'm just gonna leave the subscaling as it is. Maybe let's go with a value of 70. Alright, so this is looking pretty good, and let's go to our next step, which will be to add a new adjustment layer. and I will rename this to CC glass. And let's go ahead and go to effects, stylize, and let's choose CC glass. And for our surface, I'm gonna leave the bomb map as it is, and let's decrease the softness. Let's use maybe a value of 5. I'm also gonna decrease the displacement maybe to, let's say, 50, and maybe increase the height. Let's use a value of 35. Let's go to our shading, and I will set the ambient value to 0, and also lower the diffuse value. So let's try maybe 25, and maybe increase the specular a bit. And now you can see it's starting to look like our original effect. Let's go ahead and add the color correction tritone, and I will set this mid color to a blue, and I want to desaturate this quite a bit. So I'm pretty much using a sort of a gray with a bit of a tint of blue for this. This will be fine for now. Let's go ahead and add the curves. Let's raise up, let's increase the contrast a bit. Alright, so I think that's looking fine for now. I'm gonna go ahead and Control D to duplicate this lava layer. And let's place this layer on top of our CC glass layer. And I will rename this layer to, let's say, lava underscore fire. And let's solo this layer for a bit, and I will invert this fractal noise. And I want to raise the complexity for this guy, and maybe decrease the contrast. And if I set this layer to add, and unsolo this, and let's maybe decrease the brightness even more, you can see that this layer is filling out the dark parts for our initial lava layer. And if I go ahead and add the color correction tritone, let's set our midtones to a reddish orange. You can kind of see the effect we're starting to get. Let's maybe add a color correction curves to this layer and maybe increase our contrast a bit. And also let's go ahead and add a glow and maybe increase the glow radius. Alright, so getting closer. The only thing I want to do with this layer is actually, let's solo this. So I don't really want the fire to show as much. And what I can do is use another fractal noise layer to sort of obscure some parts of all of this fire. So I'll show you what I mean by this. If I grab this fractal noise layer and duplicate this noise, so I'm creating a duplicate here, I will set the blending mode to be multiply. And if I go to my transform properties, I'm just gonna increase the width and scale for this, and just increase the brightness and maybe the contrast as well. So now this second layer of fractal noise is obscurating our first initial fractal noise layer, and you can see if I turn this on and off, you can kind of see the effect we're getting now. Let's unsolo this layer and see what we get. Let's maybe decrease the brightness even more for our second fractal noise and maybe increase the contrast a bit. And let's go ahead and duplicate this layer and let's solo this guy. And for our second layer, let's set the tritone to be a nice yellow color, and should be alright. And I also want to increase the, let's say, the contrast for this guy. Alright, and let's unsolo this. Let's go to our CC glass layer and let's just increase the contrast for this a bit. So let's darken this up maybe a bit, and maybe add a little bit more blue. Alright, so looking much better. I will go ahead now and make a new adjustment layer, and for this adjustment layer I'm just gonna go ahead and maybe use a curves and maybe increase our highlights a bit and just give this some contrast. Let's go ahead and also add the glow to this layer, and I'm just gonna increase the radius for this guy. And I'm also gonna go to our first lava layer and also increase the glow here. Maybe add a second layer of glow, so duplicate our glow. Just increase this just to create these nice soft red aura around our fire. Let's move on to our next step, which will be our logo reveal. And I'll go ahead in my project window and just double click to import my logo. And I'm gonna drop my logo layer now above all of our previous layers. And let's go ahead and just Ctrl+Shift+C to pre-compose this layer, and I will name this pre-comp logo holder. And let's start creating our transition, and I will actually rename this composition. I will rename this to main_comp. And let's go ahead and grab this logo holder layer and pre-compose this guy again. And I'm gonna name this comp to logo_edges. Let's step inside this comp now, and let's go ahead and go to layer and add a new adjustment layer. And for this layer, for this adjustment layer, I'm gonna use a generate and Vegas effect. And I will set this the blend mode for this Vegas effect to stencil. Let's set the segments maybe to 3. And you can see that as I increase the rotation, we are creating this nice cycling effect. And I can just use an expression to animate rotation, which will be time multiplied by, let's try a value of 75. Let's preview this real fast to see if the speed is alright. So the speed is fine, but I wanted to go the other way around, so I will multiply this by a -75 value, and this will just make it rotate the other way around. Let's go ahead and set the start opacity to be 0 and midpoint opacity to be 1. And this will fade out our strokes. I'm gonna go ahead and increase the weight to maybe 4, or maybe let's try a value of 5. I'm gonna go ahead and pre-compose these layers again, so select both of these layers and press Ctrl+Shift+C to pre-compose. Let's rename this to Logo Vegas, and then I will add a new solid and make sure the color for this solid is black. Hit OK and set this black layer below our Logo Vegas layer, just so we don't have any transparency. So you can see that without our black solid we are having transparency, and we don't want that. So I'm using a black solid layer to fill our background and get rid of our transparency. Let's go back in our main comp layer and let's set this logo edges layer to add. Alright, and let's go ahead and let's add some effect to this. So set this to add. And let's go ahead and let's add a fractal noise to this, and let's solo this layer for a bit. Set the fractal noise to multiply. And now you can see I'm using this fractal noise effect to sort of break out our pattern and just create more interesting effects and a more detailed look. So I'm just increasing the contrast here, and we can go ahead now and add a tritone effect. Let's set this mid color to a reddish orange. I can go ahead and add another curves adjustment and maybe increase the contrast a bit, get a little bit more of that yellow in. Let's go to stylize and add a glow. I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate this glow. For my second layer of glow, I'm gonna increase the radius and maybe decrease the threshold a bit, and maybe increase the curves even more, so get a little bit more yellow here, and this should be fine. And if I unsolo this, it's starting to blend real nicely with our fire and our lava layers below it. And now I will create a new adjustment layer. Let's set this adjustment layer below our logo edges layer, and I will hide this layer for now, so the logo edges layer. And for my second adjustment layer here, I'm gonna rename this to CC Glass Distort. And if I add an effect, stylize and CC Glass to this, and go to my surface, and for my bump map I will use this logo edges pre-comp that we've created. Alright, and you can see as I increase the height here, so let's set this to 100, it's creating this nice displacement based off of our edges composition. Alright, so that's pretty cool, and we can go in our logo edges composition. Let's go inside our logo Vegas, and let's go inside our Vegas effect here, and let's animate the length for our segments. So let's maybe set the keyframe at around the 100 frame mark and set the keyframe for 1. Let's press U to show my keyframe information, and let's maybe go to frame 50 and set a keyframe for 0. Alright, so this will now just fade in our segments. And going back in my main comp, you can now see that the CC glass is still using this edges layer as a displacement layer and just creating this nice transition for the logo. And let's go ahead and unhide my logo edges layer. Alright, and let's go to our CC glass distort layer and let's add a bulge effect. And I'm gonna scale this bulge effect a bit, and I want to use this layer to sort of distort the whole place where our logo will appear, and this will just sort of add a little fake 3D feel to this and just result in an overall more organic animation. Let's increase the taper radius and maybe increase our bulge a bit. Alright, and I want to animate the bulge height value, and let's go maybe to around maybe frame 100 and set a keyframe for a value of 1, and let's start this from let's say frame 50, so set it to 0. And now we also have this nice bulge for our logo, and I want to set the bulge to be above our CC glass just so our CC glass deformation is intact. Alright, so add a little bit of dynamic feel to our reveal. Let's go ahead and go to our project window, and I'm just gonna drop our basic logo holder composition here. And let's set this logo holder layer below our logo edges. And let's first fade out our lava texture, and I'm just gonna go ahead and duplicate this lava base layer. Let's set this above our lava fire 2 layer, and I will invert this guy, and I want to animate the brightness from 100, and let's maybe go to frame 75, set a keyframe for brightness of 100, and let's go over maybe to frame 125, and let's set the brightness now to be a negative 100. So you can kind of see the animation here, and now I can use this layer as a mask, so let's set this to stencil luma. And this will now just simply fade out our lava texture. I'm gonna go ahead and grab this layer, duplicate this guy. Let's set this layer above our logo holder layer. Let's set the blending mode back to normal. And if I press U for my keyframe information, I'm just gonna reverse these keyframes. So we're having the opposite effect from 100% black to 100% white. And now I can use this layer as a matte for my logo holder. So let's set the logo holder layer to Luma matte for our lava base, and you can see the effect we are getting now. Let's maybe go to our original lava base, and let's actually rename this layer to lava matte. Alright, and press U for my keyframe information and just spread these keyframes out a bit and create more of a smooth animation here. And let's add an extra detail for our displacement, and I will go to my layer and create a new adjustment layer. I will rename this to displacement, and let's set up our displacement layer that we will use in a displacement map effect. And let's go to our project window. Let's drop a logo holder inside a new composition, and this new composition I will rename to displacement. Let's go ahead in our main comp, and I will grab my lava base layer with the controls layer and Control C to copy. Let's go in our displacement map and let's copy these. So I'm grabbing this initial fractional noise layer for our lava. Let's place this logo holder above our layers, and let's go ahead and add a generate fill. Let's set this to a 100% white, and I will also add a blur and sharpen fast blur to this. So I'm just trying to use this fast blur to feather out our edges for the logo. And now if I place this logo holder below our lava base, I can set the lava base layer to be Luma matte for our logo holder, and this is the resulting animation. And I'm gonna go ahead and Control Y to create a new solid, and for the color for this solid, I want this guy to be 50% gray. So I'm just gonna go to my black value here and type in 50, hit OK, and hit OK again. And I will place this gray solid below all of our layers. And the reason this solid is gray is because the displacement map effect uses the black and white values of the layer it's using as a map. So a value of gray will mean that no displacement will take place. And if I go in my main comp, we only want this displacement to take place inside this area for where the logo is. And let's see what I mean by this. Let's go to our displacement adjustment layer and let's add our displacement map. Let's go ahead and from my project window I will drop my displacement composition. I will hide this composition because we don't need to see it. And now in my displacement map effect I can set the layer to be our displacement. Alright, and if I increase the values, you can kind of see we're creating some nice distortions only in the center where our logo is. And I can animate these this value now. So let's maybe add a keyframe for a value of let's try 55. Let's add a keyframe and let's go maybe to frame 175 and let's set this to 0. And I also want to smooth these distortions a bit, so let's go back in our displacement map layer. Let's go to our lava base layer and let's add a blur and sharpen fast blur and just blur this out a bit, and this will just lower the edges between the fractals and just overall create a smoother effect for our displacement. And if I go back in my main comp, now you can see that the displacement is a bit smoother. And maybe we can increase the first keyframe here, so press U for our keyframe information and let's set the initial keyframe to 75. And maybe for our lava base that reveals our logo, I can spread these keyframes out a bit. And this should be fine. So let's go ahead and make a quick ramp preview and see what we got. Alright, so that's pretty much it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching so far. Don't forget to leave a like if you learned anything new, subscribe and stay tuned for more tutorials, and I'm out.